A common phrase in the biking community is that the number of bikes you need is N+1, where N is the number of bikes you currently have. So if you have 2 bikes, you really need 3. And once you have that third bike, now you need 4. It's a never-ending cycle that is easy to fall into, but hard to financially recover from. There are a lot of different riding disciplines out there, from road to gravel to enduro to cross-country, and there's a bike for each one. But how many bikes do you really need? The reason so many different types of bikes exist is because a bike designed for gravel riding will look vastly different from one designed for downhill or even cross-country riding. When you look at automobiles, a sports car and a truck are built differently to better fit their specific use cases. Bikes are the same. From the amount of suspension travel to the angles of the frame to the size of the tires, bikes are designed to perform in different terrains and conditions. Does that mean that a bike meant for gravel can only be used for gravel? Absolutely not. Nearly a decade ago, when I started to get back into biking, I was a newly married and very poor college student in a tiny apartment. I didn't have the funds or the space to keep a bunch of bikes, so even though I wanted more bikes, I was super limited on what I could actually have. I always had at least one bike, a 2008 Trek X01 cyclocross bike. This bike was always there because I needed it for commuting to school and work. I would switch the tires between the original 35mm knobby tires and some narrow road tires depending on if I was going to be riding strictly on pavement or if I was going to be hitting dirt roads and double track. By just getting another set of tires, I was able to open up an entirely different type of riding without dropping a lot of money or getting another bike. That said, a bike meant for a certain type of riding will allow you to ride faster, easier, and frankly more safely than one intended for something else. While I did successfully take my X01 on some single track, it was a terrifying and relatively slow experience compared to how it felt on my mountain bike. The dividing lines aren't as clear as some people think though. If you own a full suspension mountain bike with 140mm of travel, for example, do you have to buy a short travel XC bike to ride smooth and flowy trails? While you might be able to climb more easily and be faster overall on a shorter travel bike, you're going to be just fine on your trail bike. And despite what internet forums and bike ads might tell you, a hardtail with 130mm of travel will do just fine on black and even double black trails. Crazy, I know. I will admit this is only true to a point. You're not taking a road bike to a downhill park, but you get the point. On the other side of the N+1 spectrum is the idea of a QUIVER killer, a bike that can do it all. And I'll admit, I've tried to find one myself. At some point in my biking journey, a friend of mine texted me and asked, if you could only own one bike so that you could ride all the time, what would it be? While I don't remember the rest of the conversation, I do know that shortly after, he and I both had fat bikes. The logic at the time was that if I just pick a bike meant for the most extreme trail surface conditions I ride, I should theoretically be able to ride in every other situation. I'll admit this was flawed logic, and a fat bike is definitely the worst bike for riding on pavement, but it did enable me to ride all year, even when there was snow on the ground. Was my fat bike a QUIVER killer, the one bike to rule them all and take the place of every other bike I could own? Well, yes and no. Here's what I mean. While there are some people out there that do everything from road racing to crazy downhill trails, I've noticed that most people tend to stick to the middle of the spectrum. Blue and black or double black trails in the dirt and recreational gravel and road riding are the meat and potatoes for most cyclists out there. That means that most people could realistically get away with 2 bikes. One for trail riding and one for road or gravel. Besides living in a place that gets snow, I'm nothing special and realistically I'd be just fine with this exact setup. When I tried to use my fat bike as my only bike, it did a great job filling my dirt-oriented needs, but it was an absolute pain on the road and I only did that a couple of times. By nature, a QUIVER killer isn't going to be really good at everything because it's trying to just be pretty good at a lot of things. But if it's making you not want to ride something, that's a problem. In my opinion, my personal interest in doing such different types of riding means that I will never be happy with just one bike. If I had no desire to ride on the road or even gravel, I'd probably just have a fat bike with a skinnier second wheel set and be perfectly happy with it. The number of bikes you need really depends on how different, not how many riding disciplines you're interested in. If you're just wanting to ride on the road and gravel, you could probably get a gravel bike and some extra tires for the road. If you only ride on the dirt and don't ride the biggest jumps out there, a 130 to 140mm travel bike could be your QUIVER killer. Like most things in the biking world, so much depends on you and what and how you ride. So here's what I ride 95% of the time. single track and double track trails varying in difficulty from green to double black, maintained and unmaintained gravel roads and the paved roads to get there, and finally, packed or groomed snow trails in the mountains. So with that in mind, what does my ideal bike stable look like? Over the course of the last 5 years, I've come to the conclusion that I need, okay, maybe it's more of a want than a need, but I need 3 bikes. A fat bike, a modern, trail-focused hardtail, and an old mountain or gravel bike with a rigid fork. The fat bike allows me to ride through the winter and shoulder seasons by letting me ride even when there's snow on the ground. The hardtail is the go-to mountain bike for the summer. More than half of the trails where I live are rated blue and black, which are perfect for a modern hardtail. And lastly, the fully rigid bike, whether an old school mountain bike or a purpose-built gravel bike, is ideal for exploring dirt roads while not being too sluggish on the pavement between them. My current stable looks almost like this with my RSD Mayer fat bike, Salsa Timberjack hardtail, and for now, a rigid single-speed Gary Fisher rig with 40mm gravel tires. I've also added some versatility to my bikes by having a second wheel set for both the Mayer and the Timberjack, allowing me to ride everything from 27.5 plus to 27.5 fat to 29 plus to a good old 29er. Is my bike stable the right setup for everyone? Absolutely not, but it's perfect for me. So how many bikes do you need? The truth is, I can't answer that for you. While N+1 is just a lighthearted way for people to justify their addiction to riding bikes, I think it has caused some people to feel like they have to have a purpose-built bike if they even want to attempt something new. Don't let having the wrong bike stop you from trying new styles of riding. Just get out there and go ride. I hope you enjoyed this and it helps you figure out how many bikes you actually need. If it did, be sure to let me know how down in the comments and share this with your friends. Maybe it'll help them too. Also be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future videos I put out there. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.